When it comes to airline crashes, many consider JFK Jr.'s accident an open-shut case. But personal friends in Martha's Vineyard that weekend told us the weather reports in the media were completely false. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. When we looked at the NTSB report, we certainly came up with more questions than answers. In fact, some say JFK Jr. is still alive today. We'll get to that in a bit. So here are 10 weird facts about JFK Jr.'s final flight. And before you start watching this, please subscribe. It really makes a difference. Number 10. The quick cremation. In a shocking turn without the family's consent, JFK Jr. and the Bassett sisters were cremated and cast from a warship into the ocean. JFK Jr. and the Bassett sisters were Catholics, and Catholics normally do not get cremated. The decision to carry out these rites was made at the behest of Pentagon brass, and it's important to note that the Department of Defense rarely accords the honor of burial at sea to civilians. In fact, one might recall another suspicious burial at sea, Osama bin Laden. But it's not just the cremation that raised eyebrows, it was the rushed autopsy. The coroner completed 3 autopsies that night in less than 4 hours. Critics say that is clearly preposterous and shows the investigation was flawed from the beginning. Number 9. The time gaps. On July 16, 1999, JFK Jr. took off in his plane with his wife Carolyn and his sister-in-law Lauren Bassett. The plane took off at 8:38 p.m. and at 9:39 upon its approach to Martha's Vineyard, the plane dropped 4,700 feet per minute and crashed into the ocean. What many find strange is that it took 15 hours for the Coast Guard to begin searching for the plane. Friends at the Martha's Vineyard airport notified an airport employee who called the FAA. When the FAA failed to respond, Senator Edward Kennedy himself called him at 11 p.m. to say his nephew's plane was missing. When the FAA still hadn't done anything, the Coast Guard was contacted directly at 2 a.m. And at 7 a.m. that next morning, Senator Kennedy called Bill Clinton's chief of staff. It wasn't until 1 p.m. the next day that the Coast Guard officially began their search. Why did it take so long? Number 8. The missing passenger. JFK Jr. was running a magazine at the time called George. At lunch with his co-editor, JFK Jr. mentioned that he probably was going to bring a flight instructor along with him on his flight to Martha's Vineyard because he was recovering from a foot injury and wanted to have someone else as a co-pilot. What's strange is that JFK Jr.'s flight log was missing according to the NTSB report, and one of the plane's seats could not be found amidst the wreckage. Many conspiracy theorists allege this missing seat belonged to a 4th unacknowledged passenger. And if that doesn't raise your eyebrows, consider this. JFK Jr. was flying a Piper Saratoga plane, which is equipped with an in-flight recorder. But in a very convenient twist, the battery was removed from the device, making all recorded conversation in the cockpit unavailable. Number 7. Mysterious helicopters. Even though the Coast Guard, as we mentioned, didn't officially begin searching until 1 p.m. on July 17th, a number of witnesses saw mysterious helicopters around the crash site early that morning. Who did these helicopters belong to? But that's not the only strange occurrence. At 3:40 a.m. the next morning, the Coast Guard picked up an emergency beacon and started to track it, but then gave up and reversed course. The location of the signal was far from the spot that Kennedy's plane was ultimately found. So the question is, did another plane crash that night? Moreover, even though JFK Jr.'s black box was pinging out a signal, it still took the Coast Guard 5 days to find the plane. Was this a matter of sheer incompetence or clear evidence of a cover-up? Number 6. The weather. Reading the news reports at the time, they all painted a picture of a reckless JFK Jr. who took his wife and sister-in-law on a flight when the weather was terrible. In fact, many newspapers reported there was significant haze that evening. None of that could have been further from the truth. The tower manager told the NTSB that conditions were good that evening with 10 to 12 miles visibility, no fog, and no adverse conditions. Consider also that JFK Jr. had 18 years of flight experience and more than 700 hours of total flight time. If he had just used the autopilot feature on the plane, it would have guided him to within 100 feet of the runway. Why did so many media outlets misreport the actual weather conditions that evening? Was it sloppy journalism or filling in a pre-written narrative? Number 5. The White Flash. A reporter with the local Martha's Vineyard newspaper was walking on a beach that night and gave an interview to a local TV station. In it, he claimed to see a, quote, bright white flash in the sky at the same time that Kennedy's plane went down. Another witness, a Pennsylvania lawyer, heard an explosion at the same time and said it sounded like the impact of a bomb. He told local police who went out with him the very next day. The location that lawyer identified matched exactly where JFK Jr. had indicated to air traffic control that his position was at 9:39 p.m. Shortly thereafter, the Pentagon took control of the investigation, which was odd, seeing as though JFK Jr. was not flying a military plane. One possible explanation for the Pentagon's involvement is number 4, the mysterious boat. Sources close to the Kennedy family say that his death was initially investigated as a murder. In fact, in the days after the crash, multiple sources say that FBI agents fanned out all over the Caldwell, New Jersey area, going to convenience stores and seeing if anyone had recently purchased epoxy. This ties into a report from a French investigative magazine, which say that a pilot at the airport heard a weird noise coming from JFK Jr.'s plane right as it took off. The FBI also found some suspicious boating activity in the area where his plane was headed. They found an unusual number of batteries in the fisherman's boat, and they were pretty suspicious because they said, we're fishing for striped bass. The only problem is, there's no bass in that area of Long Island Sound. Who were these men, and was this lead ever investigated? Number 4. The missing videotapes. According to reports, videotapes were made of the plane on the bottom of Long Island Sound. The problem is, they were all destroyed. The footage allegedly showed that every bulb, including the emergency flashlight, every circuit board, including the engine sensors and other electronic equipment, had literally been melted. FBI investigators on the scene first concluded that a massive electromagnetic event caused Kennedy's plane to crash. Did this extreme power surge have anything to do with the mysterious boat full of batteries? How did these videotapes simply vanish, and who would have the power and the position to make that evidence disappear? Consider number 2, the Senate run. Was it possible that JFK Jr. was contemplating a run for the Senate? That would have been a big problem for former First Lady Hillary Clinton. With JFK's Kennedy roots and his killer smile, he would have been a formidable opponent in a runoff. In fact, some reports claim that Newsweek had a story ready for its July 26th edition that JFK was entering into the political arena, but the story was spiked. Who did it? And why did they spike the story? In fact, the 2004 book Sons of Camelot also claimed that JFK Jr. wanted the seat. But let's face it, Hillary Clinton is always involved in some wacky theories. But when it comes to motive, many say the real culprit behind JFK Jr.'s death was someone much, much bigger. The very folks behind his father's assassination. Number 1. The Deep State. According to sources, JFK Jr. was looking for an investigative journalist to look at some suspicious assassinations, not just his father's, but also the Rabin assassination. In fact, JFK Jr. met with high-ranking Israeli and Mossad officials to discuss that case. He interviewed the mother of Rabin's alleged assassin and came away with more questions than answers. He also hired Oliver Stone to write an article for his new magazine called Our Counterfeit History. Was JFK Jr. just stirring the pot, or had he begun to unravel a deep state cabal that was responsible for assassinations across the world? In fact, some say that JFK might have even faked his death and is still alive. They point to a couple seen at Trump campaign events who look strangely similar to JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. We'll let you be the judge. JFK Jr. was a beloved figure, and there's no question that there are many anomalies about his crash and investigation. Curious what you guys think. What's more suspicious to you? Was it the mysterious boat full of batteries, or the quick cremation and burial at sea? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks again for watching.